So what I'm doing here is I've pressed out my old trunnions out of my rockers for my 5.3. Then I ran my rockers through the bead blaster, cleaned them up. Because what I'm doing is these stock trunnions are kind of funky and odd. The big thing is these needle bearings are not encapsulated, so if these things fall apart, these little tiny needle bearings right here, they all go through your motor because they're not captured. So when they go, they'll take out your entire motor with them. So I'm taking these out, and I got off eBay, I got a set of bronze bushing trunnions. Pretty nice if you ask me. I got them from, I think, Engine Pro or something off of eBay. Ran me right around $150, $160, something like that. They're actually pretty nice. Comes all organized in this little kit. Bam. Bronze bushings. The bottom bushing's a pain in the butt to get out of the dang cup. But there we go. Bam. So, and then they have split rings that come with them. Boom. So you can see, put the two flat sides together on these guys so they sit next to each other. You can see the difference in the size of the trunnion. These bronze bushing trunnions, the upgrade kit, are designed to more evenly spread the load instead of on little rollers. It's spread out on the bronze bushing. The bronze bushing will handle higher lift, higher pressure springs. You know, they just take more abuse. And you don't really have to worry about the needle bearings coming out and ruining your motor. So these have a flat spot where the oil can get in, and then they have a oil groove in them so that you oil the bronze bushing. And then this groove here is where the snap ring, the split ring, sits in and encapsulates that, so this stuff can't just come out willy-nilly on its own. And I really like that idea, because even if one of these comes out, it's not going to take out your entire motor. The bronze, even if you're wearing the bronze, the particles of bronze that run through your motor are going to be softer than the steel. So they shouldn't gouge the crankshaft, you know, that it should just embed itself in the bearings material, and then not destroy your crankshaft and your camshaft and that sort of stuff as it's cycled through the motor as it wears. And the particles should get picked up in the oil filter, and it's not like running the little needle bearings, you know, or chunks of needle bearing through your motor. It's not like running these little metal pegs through everything. Those will destroy a motor in a heartbeat. And that's a common problem on the LS's. So what I do here is I have this arbor press that I'm using. I've got the slot in the plate here is wide enough that the trunnion will fit through. Not so wide that the bushing will fit through. And then on the rocker itself, you have a machined surface with two flats, which actually helps me press in the first bushing I press in on this side, helps me press that in square and flush. I put it just below, there's like a tapered surface up here on either side, and I press the bushing just below surface level, just like a hair below surface level. So I run with the flat sides down first, and I actually use the trunnion to press square on the bushing. So I'll run this arbor, I'll just run it down on the end of that trunnion, and then I get down here and I carefully press that bushing in, and it's square on the trunnion, it's square on the plate because of my two flat machined surfaces, and I press it right about where the trunnion goes down to even with the surface of the side of the rocker, and that usually gets me to just below, like a hair below the actual surface of the rocker, because of the taper on the rocker. And this has just a small taper on the trunnion, which, so by the time you put the two together, you're just a hair below the surface. So then I flip it over, place the trunnion in, because you can't get the trunnion in if you start pressing in this other bushing. There's absolutely no way to get that trunnion in. So put the trunnion in after you press the first bushing in. Then I like to bring the arbor press down, because I got a fairly flat surface. It's not perfect because it's been pressed on so many things. It's such a, it's old arbor press, but beggars can't be choosers. I'm using other people's equipment. So I run this down and set it on the bushing, that square flat end of the arbor press. Usually does a pretty good job running her flush, and I just go down gentle because I end up pressing it down flat onto the trunnion, because there's a shoulder on the trunnion. You can't pass the bushing past that shoulder. So when I come down flush to that point, since I can't push this bushing past the plate on the press, I'm not going to go any further. So if you force it, you're going to break stuff, and that's not good. So I go to that point, then I get me some space in here, and I have a 5/8 inch 1/2 inch drive socket. Now this socket will fit over the end of the trunnion so that I'm not pressing on the trunnion. It's also big enough to sit on the bushing itself, but yet it's not big enough to go through. The outside diameter of this socket is not big enough to go through the rocker. So I can't go any more than, I can press it enough to lock the trunnion solid so it won't turn, because there's a slight taper on the socket, slight taper on the rocker. So they'll actually meet to where they press everything so tight you can't move the trunnion in there. So I come down carefully, similar to what I did with the trunnion on the first bushing I pushed in, and I set this on the bushing, the bronze bushing, and then I press, and I just ease into it, and I check it several times to make sure that basically my end play is as minimal as possible, and that I'm pressing in the bushing square so that I get no bind when I rotate the rocker on the trunnion. And yet so I have no bind on the rocker rocking on the trunnion, and I have as minimal in play as possible, because I don't want the tip of this rocker walking all over the tip of the valve and mushrooming stuff out and just destroying stuff. So I put this in here and I come down. I got to try and get this all squared up and as even as possible so that it presses in flush, or just a hair below flush, but it also presses in even. So it's actually right now is pressing in a little more on this side than it is on this back side away from the camera. So I have to let off a little bit and readjust where this is all sitting so that I can get that to press in exactly square. Now I'll back off, I'll come out, see, and I don't do anything to the trunnion because my socket fits over the trunnion. It's not quite flush, and if I place this down here, you can see I have quite a bit of movement in play wise. So I haven't locked it up yet. I can place this back in here and I can bring it down I'm going to raise the arbor up a little since I'm down here, and I want to ease on this handle. That way I have good control of the pressure that I'm using without being stretched way out, since I don't have a camera holder for my cell phone and it's kind of propped up in a makeshift deal. I'm on my knees running the arbor press, so I still have quite a bit of in play on there. It's still not quite flush, so I still have to come down a little bit further on this, but that looks to be just below the surface level, and it's just maybe 1/1000th, maybe 2/1000ths of an inch in play, which is right where I want it. I want just a little bit of play, but not a whole lot. I don't want this to bind. So I can feel right now that this rocker is not binding, so that tells me that my bushings are pushed in square. I have barely any movement, but there is enough. In fact, I probably have more movement in the clearance between the bushing and the trunnion than I do on the in play. So now this trunnion, this rocker, spins right around that trunnion. Really, really easy. And then there's two ways you can put on these split rings. The split ring is actually small enough and easy enough. If you want to tear up your fingers, you can actually put one end in there, grab a hold of that with your finger, and then roll it over and push it on. Boop, done. Or you can do it the proper way. A pair of split ring pliers, and you can just set those in there. Boom. And that is a rocker done. I got one left in my set of 16, and that's it. So right around $150, $160 on eBay. I think it's a great upgrade. Fairly simple to do. When I pushed the stock trunnions out, I used this 14mm 1/2" drive socket. The taper on the nose of this socket is just enough to fit in there, and by the time I press it down that far, everything's come loose out of that rocker. It's really easy. There's not even a whole lot of force with the arbor press. You don't need a 20-ton shop press. You don't need a 10-ton shop press. You know, this arbor press is fine. Probably a cheap arbor press from Harbor Freight would probably work, and works great.